Dear students, this week we are going to discuss about two WTO agreements, and the first one is the General Agreement on Trade and Services, and the other one is the TRIMS Agreement and Trade Related Investment Measures. And today we are going to discuss about the service agreement specifically, and also we want to look into the global service trade and where we are, and what is the scenario of service trade in developing and developed countries, and also service sector in India, and some of the provisions of GATS agreement, General Agreement on Trade in Services. So, GATS agreement is the first multilateral trade agreement which covers trade in services. So, this particular agreement is concluded in the Uruguay round of negotiations, and you can see that the provisions, most of the provisions, this sector is a new entrant to the GATT system. So, the Indian GATT system was only dealing with the merchandise trade. So, the service sector, even though there were discussions to include the service sector, but it was never seriously discussed in the GATT, and the GATT was only taken care by the merchandise trade, but the Uruguay round of negotiations included the service trade as well. And presently the service trade, which constitutes more than 25% of the total trade and also 2/3 of global production and employment. So, it contributes 25% to the total trade, but if you take into consideration of India, almost it is 50 to 60% it contributes to the GDP. So, some countries, the total world trade, it is 25% and more than double which contributes to the Indian economy. So, service sector is important for every country. When it comes to the GATT period, so GATT was only dealing with affecting, so the reflecting a particular service trade. So, that means the GATT was only talking about very limited services, and GATS affects both the product, services and the supplier. So, the GATT was talking only about the supplier. So, the GATS, the present agreement talks about the service as well as restrictions on the service providers, and it talks about the modes of supply. We will see that what is the 4 modes of supply, and it talks about market access and exception to the national treatment principles. So, GATS is a special agreement, sector by sector negotiation and acceptance by the members. So, you can see the structure of service agreement is there is a service agreement and a sector specific commitments which is added to this main agreement as a schedule of every country. It means that the schedule will be different from one country to other country, and the agreement is in common. The schedule which limits the opening up of a particular service sector. So, this change from country to country, that is basically the difference between other agreements. For example, the goods agreement and service agreement. For example, if you take anti-dumping agreement, there is no schedule. If you take SPS agreement, there is no schedule. TBT agreement, no country basic schedules, but in services the commitments are put in specific country schedules. So, it means the opening up of service sector is based on bilateral commitments. So, the Indian commitment is in the Indian schedule, the US commitment is in the US schedule, which is attached to this particular agreement. So, it is not uniform commitments. And if we look into the trade, how it is the global trade, service trade is important for us. It is almost, you can see that 60% of global output, and now it is gone to 30% of global employment and 20% of global, 20 to 25% of global trade. So, the growth rate, which once upon a time it was 155%. So, you can see that, and there is an absolute increase in world service trade, or I would say that the movement of people or movement of services from developed countries to developing countries and the movement of persons from developing countries to developed countries has tremendously increased because of opening up of this sector. And also we can without any doubt say that India is one of the country where most benefited by opening up of this particular sector, service sector. And trade in services, which you can see that, so the expansions, it is projected that the WTO has projected that by 2050 the service exports will overtake merchandise trade. They says that in case of the United States, one of the largest exporter of services, by 2037 the service trade will exceed the merchandise trade. So, it is very near. So, the service exports or service trade, the growth rate is immense, growth rate is much higher than the merchandise trade. So, service trade is going, it is under the WTO regime, under this service agreement, the GATS agreement is going very quickly. And also we can see that around in terms of revenue. So, in some of the countries they earn 50% of their earnings from service sector, and developing countries it is saying that around 4%, 4.2% of the GDP its contribution is service sector, and developed countries the growth rate is around 3%. So, the various studies at various points of time which shows that there is lot of growth rate in the service sector. If you take India, you can see that the service sector in the last you can say that last one decade, around last one decade the service sector contribution is decreasing. So, if you take 2010, it was around 60% contribution to the GDP, and now it reached around 53 or 54%. And this is mainly because of for the last 5 years you can see there is a growth rate from 16 to 17% to 26% of the industry. So, the industrial growth rate in India is going in a very fast pace, and but the agriculture, for example, I was looking into the 22-23 data, the agriculture is going down. So, now it is less than 20%, around 17 to 18%. So, the contribution of agriculture is going down, the industry is going up, and the service sector also is going down. So, you can find the contribution to the GDP. So, that is why I said earlier also India service sector is its lifeline. The growth of service sector is its lifeline because it contributes more than 50% to the GDP of the country. If you look into some of the countries, you can see that what it means, the service trade. So, it's definitely it is the US, China, then Japan, Germany, UK, and we were in around the 5th. These are the economy. So, we have taken over the UK and now we are in the 5th position. So, the economic position. So, in a period of time we may overtake Germany as well. So, we will be the 4th largest economy in the world. So, you have to see that if the position of India as a service provider to the whole world. So, then the service sector should again grow. Then only we can our economy will grow and the total volume of merchandise trade also increase and the service sector also grow and the contribution to the GDP also will increase and our total the economic size will increase and we will take over some other countries as well. So, as the largest economies with our largest population. So, this is you can see that up to 2022 data which says that what is our service exports and our service exports which you can see that it is very constant even during the pandemic time. Especially during the pandemic time it was very high. So, you can see the 2018-19 it increased almost more than 100 million US dollars service exports. So, what does it mean? Though the merchandise trade stopped during the pandemic, but the service trade increased. The services were increased the highest in 21-22 to the tune of 134.839 million US dollars. So, it means that the whole world continue to use the Indian export sector, Indian service sector all over the world. So, especially after the pandemic, the service sector growth which you can see that the income from the service sector is increasing. So, continuously it is increasing and especially after the pandemic it is the digit has gone up from 2 to 3. So, the income is going up. So, the service exports are going up and which contributes to the country's GDP. If we look into this Indian scenario, overall India is it is around 55% or 56% market share. So, it was if it is 17-18 it is 55%, now it is around 57% maximum. So, it is fluctuating from 55 to 60%, but it is decreasing mode because the industry is increasing mode. So, Indian IT companies, one of the lifeline of the whole world. So, you have 700 global delivery centers across 80 countries and IT and other ITS services and second in India in attracting foreign direct investment, IT and other IT services. And at the same time if you see that IT industry uses a very small percentage of employment. In India, agriculture contributes to the employment and now the industry also contributes to the employment, not the IT industry, as our perception is that the IT industry contributes millions and millions, but it is a very small number and every year it is adding. So, it means that if the global service sector uses more and more Indian people, so the employment opportunity will increase, but even you can see in 2023 also the number is very less. And then you can see that the most of these employment is in the business process outsourcing industry is using more number of people. So, if you take, I have shown only the IT sector, what is its contribution? In terms of employment it is very less, but in terms of income it is very high. So, the only IT sector, not the service sector, only the IT sector contributes around 8% or to the tune of 7 to 8%. or even 9% of the total GDP. So, IT sector itself is the major contributor to the service sector in the country. And also the service sector, which shows, as I told you that the contributes now 53% around. So, it is in a decreasing mode. So, industry in a increasing mode. So, the service sector, if you take into the service sector, the major sector is tourism. It is not the IT industry. IT industry is only second. Then third is banking and insurance, and fourth is hotel and restaurant industry. Then consultancy services and professional services fifth. Even though we will discuss about the opening of legal sector is still not opened up, limited opening, but still the consultancy and professional services are fifth major area, which contributing to almost 53%, 89% of the service sector. So, if you look into the purposes of GATT, you can see that the GATT agreement says the same purpose which is mentioned in other agreements: transparency, progressive liberalization, promoting economic growth of trading partners and especially developing countries. So, I think this objective is mostly suiting to the service agreement as far as India is concerned. Economic growth and development of developing countries, because in merchandise trade we are in the negative mode. We are a net importing country, we are not an exporting country. So, here you can see that other agreements also, other trade agreements also mentioning about transparency and predictability, progressive liberalization. So, the same objective also is put in the service agreement, and which is complied by all the member countries. And you can see that many times which we saw that the contribution of service sector. So, it is around 20 to 30% of the global trade. So, you cannot discount the service sector at all. So, the service sector only excludes two exceptions: service supplied in the exercise of governmental authority, and two, air transport services. So, these are the two exemptions from the service sector. Otherwise, all the service sector will come under the GATS agreement. So, very limited exceptions are provided, like police, fire protection. So, the voluntary operations, mandatory social security, tax, customs administration, and also we can say that the civil service. Countries like India does not allow opened up the civil services. Air transport services, because air transport services are exclusively bilateral agreements, air transport agreements. So, these are the only two exemptions which is made under the service agreement. So, it is very clear, and it includes. So, we said that air transport agreements are excluded, but it includes aircraft repair and maintenance services. So, it means that the foreign service providers can open their shop in India with regard to aircraft repair, computer reservation system services, selling and marketing of air transport services. So, this is opened up. So, some of the services of even exempted areas, it is opened up. And when we comes back to the service sector, you can see that what exactly is trade in services you mean by. What is the supply of services? Supply of services means it must be from one territory of one member country to the territory of another member country. That is the first condition. And second, in the territory of one member to the service customer of any other member. So, again two countries are required, one territory of one member country to the service given to consumer of another country. 3. Service supplier of one member country go to another country and establishes its commercial presence. This is the third mode which we will discuss, and the fourth is one country supplies natural persons to provide services in the territory of other country. So, the modes of supply is based on these 4 principles, and 4 modes of supply is described. So, we will see in elaborate the 4 modes of supply. So, here the entire GATS scheme, which includes all these agreements. For example, the main agreement, exemptions in article 2, then there is an annex on natural persons. So, most of the countries have the mode for service, the movement of natural people. So, there are exemptions which is put in the annex. Then annex on air transport services. I said that mostly this happens through bilateral agreements and which is not included in the service agreement. This is an exemption. Then annex on financial services, telecommunication services and maritime transport services. So, the service agreement includes all the main agreement plus this particular annexes. So, here you can see the some of the provisions, how it is divided the agreement. So, the part 1 deals with sectoral coverages and part 2 deals with general obligations, and part 3 talks about the specific commitments governing market access and national treatment principles, and even some of the countries can no commitments with regard to market access and also with regard to national treatment principles is provided. And part 4 deals with future service rounds, which talks about schedules, structure of the schedules and procedures, and part 5 talks about institutional and procedural issues, which talks about the GATT Council, and also the part 6 talks about the final provisions and definitions. So, if you look into the part 1 which we already talked about, so trade in services. So, this first part is applicable to all countries. So, whether it is the central government must make it sure that these provisions are applicable at all levels of governance, all levels including the central, regional, local government and even non-governmental bodies. Non-governmental bodies comply with these particular provisions. For example, in the service sector, the important criteria is most of the service providers are private entities. So, it is applicable to non-governmental entities and bodies as well. So, it covers purchase, payment or use of a service, access to and use of in connection with the supply of services, and offer certain services offered to the publics generally. Then commercial presence, and commercial presence we already said that with regard to the financial institutions and other areas. And here the most favored nation treatment is provided in article 2. So, MFN principle is, we said that one of the cornerstone or one of the cardinal principle of WTO agreements. So, the MFN clause is included in article 2. And in the third part we can see that specifically which talks about market access, national treatment, and also we can see that certain restrictions, and the members are free to impose certain restrictions with regard to number of service suppliers, then value of service transactions, then number of operations or quantity of output, number of natural persons and type of legal entity, whether it is a joint venture, collaborations or what is the legal entity those who are coming to your country for providing service that can be regulated. the participation of foreign capital. So, it means that these are the heads where a domestic country can put restrictions on providing supply, otherwise they cannot put restrictions. And here article 20 is talking about the schedule. So, the schedule of commitments, every country have a schedule, the schedule of commitments which they have to given in under article 20. So, the sectoral scope, you can liberalize your own sectors. For example, India has opened up many sectors, financial institutions, tourism, and many sectors India opened up, and some of the sectors which we don't opened up, for example, the legal sector, the wholesale, the sales sector, and very few sectors we are still not opened up. For example, the higher education sector. So, definitely India may be opening very soon or in the future. So, these schedules of commitments are integral part of the service agreement. And here again, most importantly, article 22 talks about the application of the dispute settlement procedures to the service agreement, and also it talks about the dispute settlement procedures and the role of the service council or council for trade in services, technical corporations. So, the agreement which talks about the application of dispute settlement and also talks about the role of the council, the GATS council, and also you can see that which talks about 20, you can see that the article 27 which deals with denial of benefits. In certain cases, the members can deny the benefits. For example, in the case of supply of service. So, for example, in the case of supply of services from a non-member of a member. So, this from a non-member it is not applicable. Maritime transport service. So, if it has been supplied from a vessel or a particular person who operates that vessel registered under the laws of a non-member country, that means a ship carries a flag of a non-member, then the WTO rules cannot be applicable. Then, if the service person is a legal entity, so then also if such supplier covered by the denying member who does not apply for the WTO agreement. So, that means the organizations, the legal entities is also applicable, certain exemptions are applicable. Then you can see some of the provisions 28 and which says what do you exactly mean by a supplier, supply of service and service provider, service supplier, measure, etc. So, because service suppliers are the service supplier uniform definition is very important, which clearly says that any person that supplies a service, this is uniformly applicable to all 164 member countries, the same definition. And then you can see the provisions, other provisions 29. So, this annex specifically put the conditions. So, certain exemptions and obligations and new obligations and exemptions applicable to the WTO agreement. So, we can say that the GATS agreement opened up a new economic scenario in developing countries. It opened up opportunities especially for the developing countries, and also it is the first time that the services came for negotiations to the Uruguay round of negotiations, and the large economies are opened their service sector. At the same time, the developing countries are also opened their service sector. and this opening increased the opportunity of most of the developing countries. And in the next lecture, we will see the different mode of supply and only the controversies with regard to the certain areas like movement of natural persons, mode 4. Otherwise, the services agreement is highly effective, and when compared to the 1980s or before 1995 and after 1995, the service sector has a very good growth rate when compared to the mercantile trade, and it is predicted that the service trade will take over by 2050 the mercantile trade. So, it means that the service agreement have a greater role to play, and most importantly, the service agreement has to be opened up more areas. The countries like India should open up all areas, so that more opportunities will come to, more investment will come to India, and more opportunities will be opened up for Indians abroad as well. So, the service sector is going to decide the economic growth of your country in the next decade. So, next class we will deal with the different modes of service. Thank you.